Ken, thank you very much for being here. So first of all, in this film, which they bill as a documentary, and I know you say it's nothing of the kind, but they definitely tell the defense's side full-throatedly. What do you say is the most persuasive evidence that the prosecution introduced that this man, Steven Avery, who had been wrongfully convicted of a rape and had been let out, and now is on trial for murder and tried to claim, once again, I am the victim here. Once again, I'm being wrongfully prosecuted. What do you think is the most persuasive evidence you had against him that the series makers left out?
Well, in my opinion, the most persuasive was the DNA that was found on the hood latch of the victim's car. The victim's SUV is hidden by Mr. Avery and Mr. Dassey, and actually Brendan Dassey, during his confession, tells law enforcement for the first time that his Uncle Stephen went under the hood. We know that he did that because he unhooked the car battery, but the fact that he went under the hood caused, in March, the crime lab to swab the hood latch. What you got to stick your hand underneath the hood and actually release a mechanism. That hood latch had DNA on it. It came out to be Steven Avery's DNA, but importantly, it was non-blood DNA. Remember, the defense planting theory was that there's this vial of blood that apparently the officers are.
But they took it from the first case that Steven Avery was involved in, and that they spilled it inside the victim's car to make it look like Avery was in there. Your point is, how do you steal perspiration evidence?
We refuted that.
I get it. But one of the things that people point to is they say, okay, your theory was that they raped her, they tied her up, they raped her, and they stabbed her, either in the bedroom or in the garage, but somewhere on the property, and there was no trace blood evidence. Why? These two guys were such brilliant criminals that they managed to clean up all the blood evidence from shooting her and stabbing her, and people don't find that plausible.
Right. The theory of both prosecutions was exactly the same. There wasn't anything that was inconsistent, although if you watched the documentary, you would think that. She was raped and she was beaten in Steven Avery's trailer, but she was killed in the garage. That's where the shooting happened. That's what Brendan Dassey indicated. After she was killed in the garage, she was taken and thrown into her own SUV. That's why her own blood gets in the cargo area of the SUV, and they find some pattern evidence and the like. But again, the documentary suggests that this is all a mystery. How did any of this happen? It wasn't a mystery at all. It was
why wouldn't her blood evidence? Why wouldn't there be
trial.
evidence of her blood in the garage if they killed her there, if they shot her, if they stabbed her there?
Brendan Dassey, in part of his 3.5-hour confession that the documentary didn't allow the viewers to see, talks about taking bleach, a good bit of bleach, and cleaning up the area where the shooting occurred. Bleach is one of the only things that destroys or kills DNA. He and Uncle Stephen were cleaning that up. In fact, Brendan turned over to the police, and we presented it as evidence, his bleach-stained jeans that he was wearing that day. So you can see the splashes up of the bleach, which was absolutely consistent not only with the blood evidence being cleaned up, being removed because of the bleach, but also the statement by 16-year-old Brendan.
Finally, Ken, I have to ask you, you were suspended and ran into some legal trouble of your own for unethical behavior with female jurors. Some have said that's a good reason for us not to listen to anything you have to say. To those critics who say that, you say what?
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because all of this a problem which occurred because of, or at least partly because of, a prescription drug dependence happened in 2010. That's 3 years after the making of the documentary. Nothing about that really deplorable behavior occurred during the Steven Avery case, before the Steven Avery case. Nothing at all is at least truthfully or honestly attached to that. I understand that the filmmakers have said, well, we'll leave it up to the viewers as to what they're going to make out of that, and of course I had all the consequences and things that went along with that. But I'll tell you what, Megan, if you're going to try to define the prosecutor for something that he did 3 years later, then you better be willing to apply that same standard to the defense team, which I understand you're going to have them on tonight as well.
Well, and I know the judge said you acknowledged all of your behavior in the case and found that persuasive in giving you a shorter reprimand. Ken, thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks very much, Megan.
I didn't see them plant evidence with my own 2 eyes. I didn't see it. But do I understand how human beings might be tempted to plant evidence under the circumstances in which the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department found itself after Stephen's exoneration, of the lawsuit, of the Avery Commission, of the governor hugging Stephen and holding him up as an example of the criminal justice system gone wrong? Do I have any difficulty understanding what human emotions might have driven police officers to want to augment or confirm their beliefs that he must have killed Teresa Halbach? I don't have any difficulty understanding those human emotions at all.
That was Dean Strang, former attorney for Stephen Avery. Dean is with me now. Dean, thank you for being here. I must say, having watched you in this series, you seem like a very good lawyer to me, and did as much for this client as a lawyer could do. So let me ask you about what your theory is that these cops who screwed this guy over first time around and then were getting sued wanted to get rid of him again. And there's a lot of evidence that the cops misbehaved in this case. Part of what the prosecution argued in the closing was maybe the cops did plan a couple things. Well, maybe they did. But there's a ton of evidence showing these guys did it, including Teresa's bones in the fire pit outside of Stephen's trailer. How do you explain the bones being there?
They were moved there. The body was not burned there. That was the stronger part of the evidence. And indeed, the jury acquitted him of mutilating her corpse, or in other words, acquitted him of burning the body. I think it was clear, and I don't fault the filmmakers for this, but the documentary necessarily omits much of this. The better evidence here from a forensic anthropologist was that an open fire would not have generated enough heat to destroy a human body in the way that those bones were destroyed, and that the bones found in a burn barrel next door, and indeed in a quarry a quarter-mile away, also were female, also were burned. It's pretty clear the bones were moved to Stephen Avery's burn pit.
What about the fact that
the body wasn't burned there?
What about the fact that she was allegedly tortured in Stephen Avery's trailer, that she was handcuffed and had leg irons put on her as the rape took place? This is the prosecution's theory. And Stephen Avery, this is not covered in the documentary, but was at trial, is my understanding. Stephen Avery bought leg irons and handcuffs 3 weeks before the murder. Is that true?
None of that was evidence at Stephen Avery's trial. You've just described the prosecution's theory at the Dassey trial a month or 6 weeks later. But none of that was evidence in the Stephen Avery trial.
But did Steve buy leg irons and handcuffs 3 weeks before Teresa's murder?
I don't recall that, honestly. I don't recall that. And there certainly was no evidence that leg irons or manacles or handcuffs or whatever it was were used on Teresa Avery.
They were introduced into evidence. They were introduced into evidence, I think, in the second trial of the nephew. I remember seeing a picture of it. All right, let me ask you this: the stuff about Steve Avery, having some sort of fixation on her, that wasn't in the documentary, that he called her 3 times that day to get her to come over, that he liked her, that she was creeping him out. She told her boss she didn't want to go over there anymore, that when he called her that day, he did star 67, so his number would be blocked. I mean, that suggests he was unusually fixated on her.
No, it doesn't. It suggests that she had done a good job photographing a car that the family had sold earlier, and now Stephen's sister was selling another car, and he thought she'd been a good photographer. What both the film and Mr. Kratz omit is that when Teresa called into Auto Traders that day, both of the Auto Traders employees who spoke with her said that she told them she was going to the Avery property, out on Avery Road. She knew exactly where she was going. No illusions about that, no concealment of that at all. The fact that he tried to protect his privacy with 2 star 67 calls, I think, tells us nothing about who killed Teresa Halbach.
What about the sweat?
And indeed, the last call from his phone
I'm going to carry you, my apologies, I'm going to carry you
call.
over because we're short on time, so I'll try to get another question and I'll carry you over. But what about you heard the prosecutor say that his sweat was under the hood of her car. What was that doing there? Because cops can't plant sweat evidence.
There was no evidence of sweat. There was evidence of DNA transferred, Stephen Avery's DNA. The sweat idea is just Mr. Kratz's theory and never has been anything more than that. The DNA from Stephen Avery could have been transferred under that hood any number of ways. Any surface that had his DNA, his skin, or a DCI agent's glove, as he testified, could have transferred that DNA to the underside of the hood. It's really much less powerful evidence than the blood would have been for the prosecution.
Okay. I have several more questions for you, and I appreciate you giving us this time. We'll be right back again with the attorney for Steve Avery. Dean Strang is back with me now, former attorney for Stephen Avery. Dean, thank you. So the prosecutor said the reason that there wasn't blood all over that garage where they allegedly stabbed and shot this woman is because they cleaned it up with bleach. Your thoughts on that?
Stephen Avery can be accused of being a lot of things, but a really good housekeeper doesn't make the list.
But what if you've just committed a murder? And he said that Brendan Avery, Brendan, the nephew, had bleach all over his jeans, which was turned over.
I have no idea when the bleach got on the jeans. I can't imagine, especially where, as I recall, there was deer blood left in the garage, that all traces of human blood would have been removed from that garage by anybody, let alone Stephen Avery and Brenda Dassey.
Do you think the documentary does the prosecution side justice? Because the one thing that jumped out, and this is maybe a small detail in the overall, but they talk about Stephen's history of animal abuse and allow his claim, you know, when he was much younger, that he, I hope the viewers will pardon the description, but that he burned a cat alive. He suggests it was an accident. He threw it and it fell into the fire. And the truth is he poured oil all over a cat and set it on fire. And so the question is whether this accurately represents his side, I mean, the prosecution side.
Well, I mean, Mr. Kratz has been very vocal in the last couple of weeks about complaining essentially that everything he said in 240 hours of evidence over 6 weeks of trial didn't make it into 3 or 4 hours devoted in a film to this movie. But the fact is that his best arguments, his best evidence made it, and indeed claims that he made that weren't evidence made it into this film.
Well, it's certainly, it has gotten so much attention. People are so fired up about it on the petitions, and we appreciate you giving us your time tonight, sir. All the best to you. We'll be right back.
Happy.